Anyone who holds more than just a passing knowledge of the SCP Foundation has likely heard the name of one Dr. Jack Bright. Like a lot of the other high-ranking staff, his name carries with it a reputation for anomalous expertise far beyond many working at the Foundation. Having risen through the ranks and achieved the position of Personnel Director for Sites 17, 19, and 63, Dr. Bright may just seem like a highly competent and devoted member of the organization. But the history of the man himself is one that will likely forever be linked with tragedy and trauma. Jack Bright's life has been turbulent, to say the least, with themes of rebirth and regeneration constantly following him and his family, and all the curses that those ideas bring. Born to Adam and Evelyn Bright, young Jack has sadly never experienced what many would consider an ordinary life. You see, both his parents were also researchers within the SCP Foundation, meaning that since birth, Jack Bright has never known a life that wasn't linked with the Foundation and its many anomalous happenings. And it didn't stop there either. At some point, Dr. Adam Bright would rise through the ranks of the Foundation, much like his son would later come to do. Adam progressed from researcher to personnel director to site director, and then eventually even to the high station of O5 council member. But this career trajectory within the Foundation was cut short when Jack Bright's father met an untimely end, assassinated on the orders of his fellow O5 council members. But why? What could have led to young Jack suffering the loss of his Foundation-employed father? Well, it had to do with the other Bright children. You see, Jack was far from an only child. In fact, he had a considerable number of siblings. While you might be forgiven for thinking this would provide a younger Jack Bright with equals, friends that he would at least endure his anomalous adjacent childhood with, this was sadly not the case. One of Jack's brothers, TJ Bright, was born with his very own anomalous abilities. TJ had something of a gift for healing, possessing the power to absorb the injuries and illnesses of anyone around him, purely through physical touch. But the unfortunate side effect is that TJ also takes on another person's ailments himself, experiencing their pain and sickness, so they don't have to. If you're Jack Bright, it had to be hard to see your younger brother suffering from wounds and diseases passed on to him so that others don't suffer. But there's still the lingering question: what happened to Jack and TJ's father, Adam? What led to his assassination? And what role did TJ play in the events leading up to that untimely death? Well, like much of Dr. Bright's family life, it began with a tragedy. Trying for another baby, Adam and Evelyn eventually had a daughter, giving Jack, TJ, and their other siblings a new sister. However, this was sadly short-lived, as the newest member of the Bright family was stillborn. Bearing witness to the grief that would have caused his parents was no doubt hard on Jack. But even more upsetting was what came next. Naturally, having both studied anomalies within the SCP Foundation, Evelyn and Adam were willing to defy death itself in order to get their newborn daughter back. And luckily for them, they had been presented with the perfect anomaly to achieve this goal, in the form of their young son TJ and his regenerative powers. However, what resulted was a creature that later became known as SCP-321. While TJ was able to revive the child, her body aged at a rapidly accelerated rate. She became devoid of melanin in her hair, eyes, and skin. Still able to vocalize but unable to intelligibly speak, SCP-321 is known to have spatial awareness issues, as well as a low level of intelligence. On top of that, SCP-321 seems to have inherited some of her brother TJ Bright's healing abilities, capable of regenerating any injury she suffers at 5 times the normal speed, attributed to an overproduction of stem cells. It was also this that caused her body to rapidly age and grow, with no signs of stopping. Taken in by the SCP Foundation and given a designation, along with TJ, who became known as SCP-590, SCP-321 was separated from the rest of the Bright family. Adam, still a junior researcher at the time, pleaded with his Foundation superiors for his daughter to be released back into the care of her family. Every time he made the request, it was denied. It didn't seem to matter how much higher up the managerial ladder of the SCP Foundation DrBright climbed. There always seemed to be a message from above telling him no. In time, he was appointed to the O5 Council. It was then that DrBright issued a mandate for SCP-321's immediate release, and the rest of the council didn't take kindly to that. Trying to get his daughter back cost Adam his life, and meant that young DrBright had lost not only one of his brothers and a sister, but a father too. DrBright assisted the SCP Foundation with keeping his brother TJ, or SCP-590, contained for his own safety. Unlike his remaining siblings, Jack still seemed eager to follow in the footsteps of his mom and dad. Another of his sisters, Claire Pierce, was angered by the Foundation's actions and how they had treated her family. This caused her to join up with the Serpent's Hand, a group of interest with the goal of one day exposing the SCP Foundation to the world. Then there was Mikhail Bright, who had the opposite reaction to his sister. He devoted himself to the Foundation, becoming one of their most skilled and highly efficient field operatives, known to some as Agent Cowboy. Needless to say, there remains plenty of division between the Bright siblings, something that would undoubtedly exact a heavy toll on Jack, who for his part, continued his family's legacy by joining the Foundation as a junior researcher. This is where his life would once again be altered forever. To begin with, Jack seemed to have it easier than most starting out at the SCP Foundation. As previously mentioned, the Bright name already carried significant pull within the organization, not only allowing him to get his foot through the proverbial door, but also giving Jack a much-needed win after his past family troubles. After all, he had a considerable amount of emotional baggage and trauma to deal with, so the up-and-coming junior researcher perhaps deserved to coast by for a while. Although it wouldn't last long, and Jack Bright would be irreversibly and irreparably changed on one fateful day. It was a seemingly menial task, a job that could have been done by anyone else, and things might have turned out completely different if they had. But yet, in giving it to a certain junior researcher who was in good standing, the Foundation completely reoriented the trajectory of Jack's life. He had been assigned to perform research on SCP-963, an ornate and rather beautiful amulet of unknown origin and purpose. The piece was constructed from elegant white gold, sporting an oval-cut ruby surrounded by 13 brilliant-cut diamonds in a starburst pattern. It was a truly exquisite and well-crafted piece of jewelry, with a rather strange property to it. Not yet realizing the active anomalous effects of the amulet, DrBright made the honest mistake of touching SCP-963 with his bare hands. It was purely an act of human error, avoidable and yet carrying consequences that would last a lifetime, or several. You see, as it so happened, the exact same fateful day that DrBright had made the mistake of allowing SCP-963 to make contact with his skin, another anomaly had simultaneously managed to breach containment. SCP-076-2, better known as Abel. The Immortal warrior tore his way through the Foundation, pulling his bladed weaponry out of a pocket dimension and cutting down any personnel in his path as he continued his rampage. When the slaughter was over, the dust cleared and Abel recontained, junior researcher Jack Bright lay dead, tragically slain during the breach. Or so it first seemed. It was during the cleanup in the aftermath of Abel's rampage that a member of D-Class personnel named Tom Higley was assigned to dispose of the bodies left in the wake of the Undying Warriors massacre. That was when Tom unknowingly picked up the amulet that DrBright had been holding when he was killed. Instantly, the D-Class suffered a peculiar change, one that would soon become a regular occurrence at the SCP Foundation. Tom Higley became Dr. Jack Bright. Once again, like with his brother TJ's anomalous powers and the tragedy of his stillborn sister, SCP-321, the theme of rebirth and regeneration became a core part of Jack's life. He was alive once again and inhabiting a new body. Now, this might seem like a positive development for the aspiring junior researcher, but as Jack Bright would soon learn, the cost of coming back from the dead was a hefty toll to pay. After the Foundation had established that the D-Class now wearing the amulet was indeed the person he claimed to be, they quickly discovered that removing SCP-963 from the wearer would cause all higher brain function to shut down immediately. Replacing the amulet, The body of Tom Higley was able to move and speak once again, albeit with the voice and consciousness of DrBright. Through his continued experimentation with the artifact, DrBright discovered that it acted as a vessel for his consciousness, his collected memories, and his personality. They were all seemingly stored within SCP-963 and could be transferred into a new body when the amulet was worn by someone else. However, part of the high cost of Jack's newfound immortality was the immediate loss of another person for the sake of his continued life. Placing the amulet on someone else would erase everything about who they were, effectively killing them and wiping them clean to make room for Jack himself. It was only thanks to his mistake of being the last person to hold the amulet, along with being killed by Abel directly afterwards, that had now led to Jack being unable to die. Of course, the other large part of the cost Jack had to pay for living forever was that he essentially now had to live as a parasite, passed on from host to host at a regular rate. He learned that after 30 days of sustained continuous contact with SCP-963, Jack's consciousness could become permanently affixed to a new body. If the amulet was removed after this occurred, then Bright's consciousness could still be passed on to a new body, meaning that he could, in theory at least, create multiple copies of himself by transferring into new host bodies via the amulet, and allowing them to wear it for 30 days at a time to make the change permanent. Naturally, as they so often tend to do, the SCP Foundation imposed sanctions and restrictions to prevent this scenario from unfolding, executing any hosts wearing the amulet before they could reach the 30-day permanent transfer threshold. Afterwards, SCP-963 and DrBright's consciousness would be passed on to a new host, and the cycle would continue. However, after witnessing the Immortal researchers' continued dedication to their cause, the Foundation eventually relaxed its rules for DrBright. Jack then went on to continue to work with the Foundation, rising through the ranks and achieving promotions to higher stations, eventually becoming one of the most well-known researchers of SCPs to ever live. But all the while, he did further examination of SCP-963. You might be fooled into thinking that immortality would be a gift, but to DrBright, it is a never-ending curse. Moving from host to host, only surviving because of a simple mistake that changed his circumstances in ways he could never have foreseen, DrBright lives in frustration and longs to be free from what he views as a curse of eternal life. He is perpetually aware that he'll outlive everyone at the Foundation, have to watch countless people die while he lives on, just like he had to live on after the death of his father. This curse of immortality has led DrBright to long for a permanent death. Ironically, he only became a part of SCP-963 in a moment of trying not to die, and now can't at all, making the story of Dr. Jack Bright a truly saddening tale. Now go and check out Top 25 Sad SCPs compilation and Dr. Clef SCP Foundation Researcher for more Foundation inner workings and unrelenting misery.